Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. In manufacturing, we always have people coming up to us and needing something to help here, and we're wanting to help, and it feels good getting these tasks done. And then all of a sudden, maybe we've agreed to some tasks that we've actually forgotten about because they seem simple in the moment. Yeah, I can just do that. And then we may not get back to people. And that becomes a real problem for us because now we're not doing what we said we're going to do, and it's integrity, but it was just a small item. And I was having this conversation with my friend Jason A. Hunt from Owatonna, Minnesota, where my cousin Shanna and John ride their snowmobiles to get out, or in the summertime, they ride their Harleys. And so that's where my mom's from, is Minnesota. And even though he's not a huge Minnesota Vikings fan like me, he's an amazing influencer and leader in manufacturing and helping leaders in that space. Welcome, Jason.
Trevor, happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
We started talking about this wrench story. So start us with there, and I think we can jump in and help our listeners today.
Absolutely. So I love this story because it's so practical and so real. And I think it happens almost every single day for leaders. So I was working with a cheese manufacturer, and they shut down once a year just to do some PM and make sure we clean everything up and everything's operating correctly. And one day, this one day that they shut down, Victor, one of the supervisors, went over to Eric, frontline operator. He said, "Eric, here's the deal. I need to go around and replace the gaskets we have at the end of our piping. So when you make processed cheese, you melt it all down, right? So it's molten cheese. It goes through a bunch of piping, and then it heads out to the machine where you make sliced cheese or shredded or whatever else."
This has to be in Wisconsin.
Actually, Minnesota, believe it or not.
Wow.
Minnesota, a little bit of Tennessee, but there's a few different locations. And they provide to a fast food restaurant, you would know, all the sliced cheese on top of that. So you've probably had their cheese, actually.
Okay.
But here's the deal. So the guy Eric knew how to replace the gaskets, right? So he goes off and he starts, he agrees to do this deal. But then he comes back 15 minutes later to Victor, the supervisor, and says, "Victor, I got a problem." Victor's like, "Well, what's the problem?" He says, "Well, I can't find the wrench to change the gaskets. And at the end of the piping, there's a specialized nut, right? So you need a special wrench to be able to get that off." And Victor was like, "Oh yeah, no worries. I know where that is. Let me go see if I can find it for you. I'll get right back to you." And he starts walking across the shop floor, right? And you know how this goes. You start walking across, and then here comes Jane, and Jane's got a problem, right? So she comes up, she's like, Victor, I got this issue. And Victor's like, oh yeah, let me see if I can check into that, right? And you keep on walking down the hallway here, right? And then here comes Nate, and Nate's got another problem. And it's like 3 hours later when suddenly the light bulb went on in Victor's head, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute, I was supposed to find this wrench." Now here's a question for you, Trevor. This is the powerful question. What do you think Eric, the frontline operator, was doing during these 3 hours?
He wasn't looking for the wrench because he was just waiting for someone else to get it. And
he was probably having one of the best days of his life, right? Because it's not his responsibility. I like to refer to it as like a monkey, right? So Victor has this monkey. We'll call him gaskets because we got to change gaskets, right?
Yeah.
Passes the monkey off to Eric, the frontline operator. And Eric's like, "Oh yeah, I'll take it." But Eric's number one goal, his number one thing that he wants to do as soon as that monkey gets on his back, is to find some way to get it off his back. So in this case, it was, "I can't find the wrench." And so the long and the short of it is this. Eventually, Victor remembers. He goes and finds the wrench right where he thought it was going to be. He starts to come back to try to find Eric. And what do you know? Eric's shift had just ended. And so now Victor calls up his wife and says, "Honey, I'm not going to make it home for dinner. Plus, he's going to maybe miss the volleyball game that he has for his daughter." And he thinks this whole delegation empowerment thing just is baloney. Like, it doesn't actually work, right? And I think there's a fundamental issue here, and it's one that I believe a lot of leaders believe in. We believe that we have to solve every problem and have the answer to every question. That's just kind of in leaders' blood, right?
Yeah.
And this is the problem that led Victor to missing his girls' volleyball game.
And is it the endorphins we get of like, "Oh, I'll find the wrench for you," like, "Oh, I kind of know where that is"? Is it just that where it's in us, where it's easier just to, hey, it's only going to take me 5 minutes, not thinking that, hey, hey, I'm going to get interrupted with maybe something even more crucial in that moment and I could forget. But like, what's driving our brains?
I think a lot of it is, and I love leaders. I mean, it's really rare that I meet a leader that doesn't care, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their heart is into it and they want to help. They want to be helpers. And so I think part of it is their desire to help. And I think the other part of it is their need for a sense of importance. When we believe, or when we actually do solve the problems or have the answers, we feel important. And that's cool. We need to feel important. And there's this piece of self-confidence all of us leaders need to have. But here's the deal. If we keep going down the road, answering all the questions and solving all the problems, we're stripping away the opportunity for people like Eric, our frontline operator, to learn. Mm-hmm. We're taking away the opportunity to critically think, to figure out how to solve their own problems, to be able to kind of develop some of those primary fundamental leadership skills that hopefully one day down the road, when we've got a position open, we can move Eric into. Yeah. If we're always giving answers and always solving problems, our leadership bench is going to be thin.
Yeah, then we're another participant in it. And when you're in it, you can't step back and zoom out and really be that coach and that person to help navigate that ship. Otherwise, everybody's rowing, but no one knows the direction that we're going in because we're so busy rowing.
Exactly right. And so this is a fun concept, because what this does in the end is it helps leaders save time. I know that's kind of counterintuitive because we think, I can just run over and get the wrench, but it does. It saves time, because here's what we can do. Instead of getting that wrench, Victor easily could have turned over to Eric and say, this is a good problem. I think there's 3 places this could be located at. Number 1, we just did a 5S, scenario, and there's a shadow board. And of course, the tool should be on the shadow board. But Trevor, you and I both know those are never where they're supposed to be at, right? So he could tell Eric, hey, go check out the shadow board. If it's there, cool. If not, I also know that yesterday the slice machine was down and they may have used it over there and somebody just left it there. And I can think of a third place. There's a tool chest back in the warehouse. There's a red, and every once in a while I see it there. I don't know why it ends up there, but every once in a while I see it there. So could you go check those 3 spots and then come and tell me, did you find it? Didn't you find it? It's as simple as that.
Man, and then he could come back in 15 minutes, still not find it, but now we've only lost 15 minutes. We didn't lose 3 hours.
Yep.
And I don't miss dinner.
Yeah, and you don't miss it. And the responsibility still is on his back. So we change this to another scenario. If you're listening to this, just pull the car up to the side of the road for a minute, pull open your email. I'm going to guess somebody has come to you with a problem in the last 25 minutes, because that's just what happens, right? Yeah. They're always coming to us with problems. Text message, voicemail, email, whatever. It's usually circled around our phone. Take a look at what your normal and natural response is. Do you normally just solve people's problems for them? And if that be the case, instead of solving the problems, maybe give them some options. I love the number 3, brain science. There's some great stuff around brain science. Give them 3 options to try out. If they're a little more advanced, like if you feel like your people are, they just have a little more capacity for critical thinking, don't give them any options and just say, hey, Trevor, that's a great problem. What do you think we should do to solve that?
Yeah. It's habit forming, right? I mean, that's why, if you're listening to the podcast, you're looking to change a habit, because if you want to keep getting the same result, then you're not going to, read a book or listen to a podcast. But it takes that kind of repetition to say, after I listen to this podcast, if I'm driving in today, like, can I catch myself once today? Is there one window where I can just slow down for a minute and just kind of say, okay, I know the answer and I could grab the wrench, but what would it look like if I didn't?
Exactly right. And here's what I got to tell you. People are not going to be happy with you at the beginning. They're just not. Again, their goal is to get that monkey off their back. And so they're looking for some way to get out of the work. And what you're doing is actually putting up a fence and saying, no, in this place, we're helping everybody do their work, right? My experience comes from education. And I recall one time a teacher came down to my office just furious about a situation. She wanted me to solve this problem with the student. It wasn't my problem. It was her problem, clearly. But she wanted to get the monkey off her back. Sure. So I had the temptation to say, oh yeah, I'll call him down. I'll call parents. We'll figure this out. I got this, right? Because I want to be the nice guy. But at this point, I'm like, no, I need to help her learn, right? This is an opportunity for her to think critically and solve her own problems. So I simply said, that's a good problem. It's kind of a bummer. What are you going to do about that? And she got upset. She's like, oh, no, this isn't my problem. This is you need to take this up. I can't do this right now. And the irony behind it, Trevor, is she was actually working on her administrative certificate. So she was working on becoming a principal. And I told her, I said, take off your teacher's hat, put on your principal's hat, try it out. And she's like, no, it's too personal. I can't do that. Right. And I refused to let in. I just said, great, here's the deal. It looks like right now you can't come up with a solution. I do know that in about 3 hours time, you've got a preparation period, right? A free hour block of time. I said, why don't you go back to the classroom, keep teaching the kids, go about your daily activities. And in 3 hours, I'm going to come find you. And maybe by then you would have thought of an idea or two of how to solve this situation. And she just flew out of the room. I mean, just angry. She slammed the door, the whole thing. And it hurt. Like leaders have to have courage to make these kinds of decisions, right?
It's easier just to fix it yourself.
Oh my gosh, tremendously. Anyways, 3 hours went by and I went right up to her room, just like I said I was going to do. I had to put my calendar so I wouldn't forget, but ran right up to her room. And I walked in and she was completely calm and seems like everything was great. And I'm like, hey, I'm here. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this problem. She's like, oh yeah. No, I talked to some other teacher buddies. We got to figure it out. We're good. So it saved
it's like, why are you here?
Right. So I saved time and I helped her learn. I helped her solve her own problem. And she knows, because we're setting up habits, just like you said, she knows the next time she has a problem, she can come to me, but I'm not going to solve it.
We're talking manufacturing and then you're talking about teaching. And I was talking to my daughter, Paige, and she's in her last year of teacher's college. And we were talking about like, I don't know if this is what I want to do forever. And I said, hey, I know so many people that are so happy with what they're doing and they were teachers. And it doesn't mean you'll be a teacher forever, but it's part of your journey. And you're having, and I've heard the success from your clients, Jason, that you're having, and some of your lessons come from your teaching to leadership and principle. And so what's your big learning moment from there that you take with you now? Yeah,
no, thanks for asking that. And it's funny, primarily I work in manufacturing right now, right? I help supervisors and managers and we just teach people skills and help give them they're great operators and we promote them and suddenly they're stuck, right? But a lot of my stories come from education and some are like, well, wait a minute, how does that connect? I think it does really well. I think it's actually good to take scenarios outside of manufacturing and bring them in and then ask the question, how does this apply to you? Because it is like leadership is leadership. I don't care where you are. It's just leadership. And my biggest lessons of leadership actually came from my hardest struggles. And I might even call it a failure in school. I mean, that's just really where it came. So for most of my life, my career aspiration was to become a principal of a school. That's what I wanted to do. Got my undergrad degree in social studies and English as a second language, taught for several years, went back to college, got my graduate degree and principalship license, and then started working as an assistant principal in a couple schools. One fine June day, Owatonna School District called me up, and he learned how to pronounce it. So if you're listening to this, kudos to Trevor for figuring that one out. But they called me up and they said, hey, Jason, how would you like to be our junior high principal? And I know for many of you listening, that's probably the content of nightmares. I get that. But it was my aspiration. It was my dream. So I said, yes, absolutely. We did the happy dancing with the family to Owatonna. And the first year was beautiful. People were nice to us. They did what I asked them to do. They invited me to social events. I thought I made it. Like, honestly, Trevor, I thought I could be in this leadership position for the next 40 years and then retire. And then year two hit. And in year two, the gloves came off and people weren't nice anymore. In fact, I realized that our culture was extremely toxic. Teachers were being mean to each other. Many of them were requesting to leave the school or even the district looking for different jobs. Our student behavior was out of control. We had problems with attendance. I'm a data junkie, right? I am task oriented. That's why I do what I do. I help people become people oriented because I get it, right? And so I love data. But I couldn't find any good data from all of our standardized testing to show that we were on a good track. I mean, it was a mess. It was a mess. And there was one point, Trevor, I was just done. It was just so hard. We'd suspended some kids. I had parents yelling at me. We made some decisions in the school. I had problems with some of the teachers and I just was done. I wanted to be finished. You ever feel that way once in a while?
Yeah,
right?
I can feel it right now.
I mean, if you step into managing a plant, for example, or even if you move into a supervisor or manager role, it's different work. And there are days when you just, no, please put me back on a machine. I know how to work that, right?
That's just what I was thinking.
Anyway, so I'm stuck. I come home. I tell my wife that I'm finished. I'm not going back to school the next day. I'm going to write my letter of resignation and send it in and just move on. There's got to be something different for me. And she looked at me and she goes, Jason, no, you're not. And I'm like, what do you mean? No, I'm not. like, you don't understand all the head trash that's been going on, like all these struggles that I've been, if I've told you, you'd probably be scared, right?
Yeah.
And she goes, well, really, you don't understand. We have 4 kids. We need health insurance and a regular paycheck. You're going back to school. And I like to be married, so I went back to school. Only this time it was different. I started asking questions. First, I'd start with people that I really knew, trusted, and liked. But eventually I moved to this place where I got the courage to ask the union president. And her and I didn't see eye to eye. In fact, to be quite blunt and honest, I didn't like her. I had very different opinions, and I thought she was probably doing some things to tear my leadership down.
This is so relative to manufacturing. Like this is UAW, CAW.
Oh yeah.
Trying to get feedback.
Yep. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for her and the work she does. We just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But I knew I needed to talk to her because she's a straight shooter and she's a lot of influence. So I sat down one day and asked her, can you give me some feedback? She got this huge smile on her face, like she'd been waiting for this day since the moment I started, right? Bring it on, my friend. And she flat out said, Jason, you're just so messed up. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, you think leadership is about your title, which I did. Okay? I was 32 years old, leading a school of 100 students and 800 staff members, making over 6 figures. That felt good. And it was my title. And that was how I was leading, but it wasn't working. She said, you think leadership is about your knowledge? Again, leaders have all the answers, can solve all the problems. I thought that was the deal. She goes, it's not working for you. Then she said, you think leadership is about management? And that's the one that hurt the most, right? Flow charts, systems, I got it. Nailed down. Our school was beautiful, but it wasn't working. And then she gave me this analogy, which I'll never forget. And hopefully our listeners can keep this in mind too. She said, it's like you're a locomotive going full steam down the tracks, but you've not connected to any boxcars. And a locomotive without any boxcars is useless. Not established influence. I've not taken the time to get that personal relationship and connection with my staff. And that's why I was in trouble.
It's interesting because I always say, they always say, what's the main problem in manufacturing? I usually say disconnect. And I love the caboose running down there with no cars behind them. And there's not going to be a lot of movement if you're leading the charge and there's no one connected to you.
My brother Jake, my whole family's in manufacturing, ironically, even my 17-year-old son. But my brother Jake worked for an aluminum extrusion plant, and he just really struggled. He put 10 years into that plant, but there was just no real good connection with his manager. There just wasn't. His manager was a little bit of a hothead, very controlling, extremely micromanagement, just a lot of things. And Jake is like talented, but he'd come in, he'd work every day. He knows Spanish too, so he was running a Spanish crew in addition to his own crew, and just a really valuable asset for this company, but never was promoted. Would apply, never promoted, just never getting there because there wasn't that connection with his direct manager. Because the managers had no interest in that. Doesn't help. The manager was family of some of the leadership. We know how that goes sometimes in some of our small businesses, right? Yes. Anyways, at one point he too gets fed up. Instead of his wife saying you need to go back to work, he actually quit and found a different job. And he started working in a CNC plant. And in this plant, they started him on the night shift, and he had a determination to do everything exactly the opposite of what his manager was doing. That's how he interviewed. That's how he got hired. And then he was a shift lead for the night shift, right?
Well, opposite from the last place.
Opposite from the last place, right? So the guy was
like,
not
I know
a connector.
What not to do.
And so he wanted to become a connector, and he would every day go in, have personal conversations, talk to them about their lives, bring in cases of Mountain Dew. I mean, this guy was nailing it. And their results went up 130%. Their output did. They were behind. They weren't meeting their KPIs or anything, but it went up 130%, and it became the best and strongest shift of the whole entire plant. So they continued to promote him. He's a plant manager now. Why? Because he knows how to connect, right? He just figured out how to be able to make this work. And in a matter of about 7 months, they just promotion after promotion, and he's getting, that place is ticking right now. It's really performing really, really well because they transformed from being so focused on KPIs and products and what we can get out of the door to let's focus on our people. What can we do to really develop that relationship and connection with our people?
And you see it as like the relationship is that foundation, and then the KPIs will work.
Yeah.
When you've got that, it's just that we try to do it with no foundation in the house. So I kind of look at it as that's kind of like, that's the base. And if you don't have connection, KPIs don't matter.
And here's the deal, Trevor. So if you haven't had that connection and you're not focused, you're just focusing on KPIs, it's all numbers. It's all numbers, right? That means people like Victor is going to go find that wrench. Because it's not about developing people. It's about numbers. When you have the connection, that's when it becomes about developing people. That's when we have to have the courage to stand up and say, you know what, Trevor, that is a good problem. What do you think you're going to do about that? And that can happen when you lay the foundation down, because now people understand, right? You're there to help them learn and grow. That teacher that I had that stormed off, she knew in the end, I was there to help her grow. So there wasn't any long-term ill feelings about that. Frustrating for her in the moment, probably frustrating for me too. But she knew, like, these are the acts and the steps we're going to take when we truly care and connect with our people so we can develop them. And as they get better, we don't have to worry about KPIs. It's just going to happen.
I know this plant that's launching right now, and they're hiring a lot of people, and a lot of times people just don't show up after they've even been hired. And even right from that onboarding to the people that we're trying to keep, and we get so focused on those numbers, and we do have some connection, but is it enough? Like, is it enough to say, okay, so hey, this is a new company, and this is where we're going, and this is where where do you see yourself in this? Let's talk about that, and just kind of creating that vision of, like, we're connected. Like, let's connect before this train takes off today. Let's just make sure we're all connected. I mean, you got a kid's storybook that you can write for manufacturing there, Jason, with that train story.
Yeah.
So let's take it back as this episode wraps up, and I got about 10 more questions with not enough time. But if I think back to the wrench story and what you've been working with leaders, so what can someone walking into a plant today do a little bit different? What if you were coaching somebody one-on-one and they didn't want to look for that wrench, but just like an addiction, they just want to get the wrench? What advice do you have for them, Jason?
I think first and foremost, it's a recognition of what your default mechanism is, right? So I literally have people pull out their phones and go through, like, what has been your normal response? How many monkeys are you taking back on your own back? Just to help us realize how frequently do that. Because I'll tell the story and people will think, but that's not really me. When it is, right? If we're really real with ourselves, we all do it. We all do it because we want to be nice people and we want to feel important. So it happens to all of us. So I think recognition that there are opportunities daily to change. Second piece here is find some strategy to keep that monkey on the back of the other individual. If you want to use options, use options. You want to turn it around and just ask the question, well, what do you think you should do to solve this problem? Great. That's another strategy. Yeah. Another resource that I'll provide to you is a book. It's called Turn This Ship Around. Captain Marquet was put in charge of a USS submarine, a nuclear submarine. It was awful. He was stuck too, right? Yeah. I mean, he tried typical military top-down leadership, which works in a lot of ways. And when it comes to safety, please, that's what I want, right? But it wasn't working on this ship. He needed to figure it out. Yeah, exactly. and so he taught, he realized, and a nuclear ship's extremely technical, right? There's no way that a captain's going to know everything about that ship. There's just no way he could have all the answers. And so he recognized that his people were the ones that actually have the answers, and therefore they're best suited to solve the problems. So he simply came through and he says, look, here's our policy. You come to me with a problem, you're going to come to me with I intend to statement, right? So, hey, our radar equipment is down. I intend to A, B, and C. And basically what this did is it gave people to take ownership over their own problems, but still kind of get that check off from the leader saying, yep, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Because most people have ideas, right? Most people want to solve problems, but they're a little hesitant to take action, right? When I work with managers over supervisors, their biggest frustration is our supervisors just won't take action. Like, they got good ideas. They want to do things, but it's like they got to have my permission for everything. Cool. Turn that into a system, right? Teach them I intend to. So they come to you, they present the problem. Here's what I intend on doing. And all you have to do is nod your head, right? Every once in a while, it might be a crazy idea like, whoa, slow down, hold on a minute. That's not going to work. And then you can get into a coaching situation. But most of the time, it's just nodding your head. And therefore, you're really empowering your people to take control over their own responsibilities. It's a powerful piece for us to just encourage and develop leadership in our organization. It really is.
I love it. And what you just described is empowerment. And that delegation is the easy part, right? You can just kind of have somebody else go find the wrench. But what you're saying is that whole conceptual difference. And I've been hearing a lot about micromanaging as well. So that resonates with that whole I intend to instead of, I'll just get it to you for you. That makes so much sense. I'll leave a link in the show notes where I got a 1-page book report on that, Turn the Ship Around. And it's so, nice. So it resonates with manufacturing. I mean, you and I are both in this helping, working with manufacturers to help with the connection, and it makes so much sense. So Jason, for our listeners, what do you want to leave them with today? And you have some reading material. You've got some great resources. I've watched some amazing YouTube videos that you have. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you and continue to learn with you?
Yeah, I think the one thing, if I could leave your listeners with, is just, it's a mind shift, but can you go about your day every day thinking about how you can develop others, right? It's just a mind shift. I know that most of us are focused on the numbers, right? We've got to get the products out, get the parts hung, get the shipments loaded, whatever, right? I understand that. And that creates a profit. We got to have a profit because otherwise we can't pay our people. But there are so many opportunities during the course of the day where if we just stand back for a moment, we'll recognize this is a learning opportunity, and this is a learning opportunity, and this is a learning opportunity. I'm not saying you have to take all of those. Let's take one a day.
Take one.
Let's take one a day. And you're going to see your leadership transform, and you'll see your people transform because they'll become leaders. Yeah. And when it's time to hire a new supervisor, you'll have a handful of people ready instead of wondering who in the heck's going to be the next person to do it, right? So everything I do is focused on influence and how we can develop influence. I believe there are 4 components to that. We need to develop care. We need to connect with people. We need to collaborate with them on their growth and have the courage to do things like we've been talking about today and stand up and make hard decisions. So I've actually written a leadership book series called Uncommon Leadership. One book on each one of those directed specifically towards people in manufacturing. Each book is low on philosophy and high on tools. So every book has between 9 to 12 tools. The monkey is one of the tools, right? There are several tools that are in every single book that I have. And again, I just write it to help people out. I was stuck in a portable classroom. I hated my job in leading. My job, my goal, my desire is to help people so they don't get stuck in their own portable classroom, whatever metaphor that might look like for you. How do you find me? I've got a website, Influencing for Impact. That's FOR in the middle, influencingforimpact.com, or just search for my name on LinkedIn, Jason A. Hunt. You'll find me. I'd be happy to connect, happy to answer any questions that you might have, happy to talk about your organization, how we might be able to kind of help your leaders move from being task-oriented to people-centric.
I love it. And just like the National Speakers Association, I think manufacturing is the same. There's a big pie out there. We all need to help each other. And I encourage you to reach out to Jason. And I'll continue to keep you updated on the Vikings, and maybe 2024. Every year for 50 years, I've been optimistic, and I'm not stopping now. So thanks so much.
We do that in Minnesota. We keep our hopes high, and then we get disappointed every year. But maybe this will be your year.
Thanks so much, Jason. Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.